Christopher Johnson stood frozen in the middle of the airplane aisle, his first-class ticket crumpled in his trembling hand. Every eye in the cabin was locked on him. The flight attendant, a tall woman with bright red lipstick and cold eyes, blocked his path like a wall. "Sir, I'm going to ask you one more time to return to your actual seat in economy," she said loudly, making sure everyone could hear. "We will not tolerate ticket fraud on this aircraft." Christopher's heart pounded so hard he could hear in his ears. His expensive suit, the same one he'd worn to close a $20 million deal just hours ago, suddenly felt too tight. The leather briefcase in his other hand, filled with contract that would change hundreds of lives, felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. "This is my seat," Christopher said quietly, his voice shaking. He held up his ticket again. "Look, seat 2A, first class. I bought this ticket myself." The flight attendant didn't even look at the ticket. She crossed her arms and raised her voice even louder. "Security has been called. If you don't move right now, you will be removed from this flight and possibly arrested." Behind him, Christopher heard whispers. Mean whispers. Phones came out. People were recording. A little girl asked her mother, "Why is that man in trouble?" Her mother shushed her and pulled her close, as if Christopher was dangerous. Christopher felt something break inside his chest. He was the CEO of one of the fastest-growing tech companies in New York. He had just been on the cover of Business Monthly magazine. He employed over 300 people. He donated millions to schools and hospitals. But right now, in this moment, none of that mattered. All that mattered was the color of his skin. "Please," Christopher said, and he hated how small his voice sounded. "Just check your computer. Christopher Johnson. Check the passenger list." The flight attendant rolled her eyes. "I don't need to check anything. I know what I see. Now move, or I'll have you dragged off this plane." 2 security guards appeared at the front of the plane. They were big men with serious faces. They started walking down the aisle toward Christopher. This couldn't be happening. Not again. Not after everything he'd worked for. Not after every obstacle he'd overcome. Christopher's phone buzzed in his pocket, but he couldn't move. He felt like his feet were glued to the floor. The security guards were getting closer. The other first-class passengers stared at him like he was a criminal. One man actually moved his bag away from the empty seat next to him, as if Christopher might try to steal it. "Sir, come with us," one security guard said, reaching for Christopher's arm. That's when Christopher heard a voice crackle over the airplane speaker system. "This is your captain speaking, Joshua Reed." The voice was calm but firm. "There seems to be a situation in the cabin. All crew members, please stand by. I'm coming out to address this personally." The flight attendant's face went pale. She glanced nervously toward the cockpit door. Christopher's heart was racing even faster now. What was happening? Captains never left the cockpit before takeoff. Never. The cockpit door opened with a click that seemed louder than thunder in the silent cabin. Captain Joshua Reed stepped into the first-class cabin. He was a tall man with gray hair at his temples and a uniform covered in pins that showed his years of experience. His face was serious, almost angry. Everyone held their breath. Joshua's eyes swept across the scene. The flight attendant with her arms still crossed, the security guard standing too close to Christopher, and Christopher himself, still holding his crumpled ticket, looking like he wanted to disappear into the floor. But Joshua didn't look at Christopher the way everyone else had been looking at him. His eyes narrowed, and he stared directly at the flight attendant. "What exactly is going on here?" Joshua asked, his voice sharp as a knife. The flight attendant smiled nervously. "Captain Reed, I was just handling a situation with a passenger who..." "Who what?" Joshua interrupted. His jaw was tight. "Who has a valid first-class ticket and is being harassed in front of everyone." The flight attendant's smile disappeared. I thought..." "You thought what exactly?" Joshua's voice got quieter, but somehow more powerful. The kind of quiet that meant serious trouble was coming. Christopher watched in shock. The captain was defending him. But why? They'd never met before. Or had they? Joshua pulled out a small device from his pocket. His hands were shaking slightly. He pressed a button, and Christopher heard a ringtone. It sounded familiar, but Christopher couldn't place where he'd heard it before. "I received a call 5 minutes ago," Joshua said, looking around at all the passengers who had been judging Christopher. "A very important call. And what I learned in that call changes everything." The flight attendant took a step back. "Captain, I was just following protocol." "Protocol?" Joshua's voice rose. "What protocol allows you to accuse a paying passenger fraud without even checking his ticket properly?" Christopher's phone buzzed again. And again, something was happening. Something big. Joshua looked directly at Christopher for the first time. Their eyes met, and in that moment, Christopher saw something unexpected in the captain's face. Recognition. But that was impossible. They'd never met. Christopher was sure of it. "Mr. Johnson," Joshua said slowly, and the way he said the name made everyone in the cabin go completely still. "I believe we need to talk. Right now." The security guards looked confused. The flight attendant looked terrified. The other passengers looked shocked. And Christopher? Christopher felt the world tilting sideways, because Captain Joshua Reed knew his name. He knew his name without looking at any ticket or passenger list. "How?" Joshua held up his phone. On the screen was a photo. Christopher couldn't see what it showed, but whatever was made Joshua's hand shake harder. "Everyone needs to sit down immediately," Joshua announced to the entire cabin. "This flight is delayed. And Miss Rodriguez." He looked at the flight attendant with eyes full of disappointment. "You're going to want to hear this, too, because what I'm about to explain will change your life." Christopher's mouth went dry. His head was spinning. None of this made sense. "What's happening?" Christopher finally managed to whisper. Joshua looked at him, and for just a second, Christopher thought he saw tears in the captain's eyes. "Something I've been waiting 12 years to do," Joshua said quietly. "Something I never thought would be possible." He pressed another button on his phone. A call connected, and through the phone speaker, a woman's voice said something that made Christopher's knees go weak. "Joshua, did you find him? Please tell me you found him." Christopher grabbed the nearest seat to keep from falling, because he knew that voice. He knew it from a lifetime ago, from a moment that had changed everything, from a day he'd spent 12 years trying to forget. And suddenly, Christopher understood why Captain Joshua Reed's hands were shaking. This wasn't about a first-class seat at all. This was about something much, much bigger, something that was about to turn Christopher's entire world upside down. Christopher's legs felt like jelly. He gripped the seat harder, his knuckles turning white. That voice on the phone, it couldn't be Sarah. The name came out of Christopher's mouth, like a ghost from the past. Joshua's eyes widened. "You remember her." "Remember her?" Christopher wanted to laugh, but nothing about this was funny. How could he forget? 12 years ago, Sarah had been dying. A car accident on a rainy night in Brooklyn. Christopher had been driving home from his first real job interview when he saw the crash happen right in front of him. The other driver had run away, just left her there, bleeding and trapped in her crushed car. Christopher had pulled over. He'd climbed into the wreckage, cutting his hands on broken glass. He'd held pressure on her wounds with his own jacket while calling 911. He'd talked to her, kept her awake, told her stories about his dreams of starting a company one day. He'd stayed with her until the ambulance came. And then, when the paramedics took over, Christopher had quietly left. He never gave his name. He had an important interview the next morning, and his hands were bleeding. He needed to go home, clean up, and prepare. He never thought he'd see or hear from her again. "How did you?" Christopher started, but his throat was too tight to finish. Joshua looked around at all the passengers who were still staring. Some had put their phones away. Others were recording everything. The flight attendant, Miss Rodriguez, stood frozen like a statue. "Not here," Joshua said firmly. "Mr. Johnson, please come with me to the cockpit. We need privacy for this conversation." "Captain Reed, that's against regulations," Miss Rodriguez said weakly, but her voice had no power anymore. She looked scared now, like she was realizing she'd made a terrible mistake. "I don't care about regulations right now," Joshua said, not even looking at her. "This is more important than any rule." One of the security guards cleared his throat. "Sir, we were told it was a problem passenger." The only problem here, Joshua interrupted, his voice hard as steel, is that a valued passenger was treated like a criminal for no reason except. He paused, looking directly at Miss Rodriguez. Except for assumptions that should never have been made. Miss Rodriguez's face turned red. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Christopher's mind was racing. He followed Joshua toward the cockpit, his legs moving automatically while his brain tried to understand what was happening. The other first-class passengers watched them pass. Their faces had changed. The judgment was gone, replaced by confusion and curiosity. Inside the cockpit, it was cramped and filled with buttons and screens that glowed in the dim light. Joshua's co-pilot, a young woman with short brown hair, looked surprised to see a passenger. "Captain? What's going on?" she asked. "Emily, I need a few minutes. Can you step out?" Joshua said. Emily looked between Joshua and Christopher, clearly confused, but she nodded and left, closing the door behind her. Now it was just the two of them. Joshua sat down heavily in the captain's chair and put his head in his hands. His shoulders shook slightly. Christopher realized the man was crying. "Captain Reed, I don't understand," Christopher said softly. "How do you know about Sarah? How did you find me?" Joshua wiped his eyes and looked up. "Sarah is my sister. My little sister. She was 23 years old when that accident happened. The doctor said she should have died. She lost so much blood. But someone stopped and saved her life. Someone who disappeared before anyone could thank him." Christopher's heart felt like it might explode. "She's your sister?" "For 12 years, she's been trying to find you," Joshua continued, his voice breaking. "She hired investigators. She put up posters. She created websites. Nothing worked. You were like a ghost. She only remembered a few things, your voice, your kindness, and something you said while she was fading in and out of consciousness." "What did I say?" Christopher whispered. "You told her your biggest dream was to start a tech company in New York. You said you want to call it Horizon Tech because you believed everyone deserves to see a bright horizon, no matter where they come from." Joshua pulled out his phone and showed Christopher the screen. It was an article from Business Monthly. The cover story about Christopher and his company, about Horizon Tech, about how a young black man from the Bronx had built a multi-million-dollar company from nothing. "Sarah saw this article 3 days ago," Joshua said. "She called me immediately. She was sure it was you. Your company name, your story about growing up poor, your age, everything matched. But she couldn't be certain. So many years had passed." Christopher felt dizzy. He sat down in the co-pilot's chair. "I never knew she was looking for me. I never thought. I just did what anyone would do." "That's where you're wrong," Joshua said firmly. "Most people drove past that accident. We found that out later. At least 6 cars saw the crash and kept going. But you stopped. You saved her. And then you vanished." "I had an interview the next morning," Christopher said quietly, feeling ashamed now. "My hands were cut up. My clothes were ruined. I needed to go home. I thought the paramedics would take care of her. I never imagined that she'd spend 12 years looking for you." Joshua finished. "That she'd marry, have 2 kids, build a whole life that wouldn't have existed without you. That every birthday, every Christmas, every important moment, she'd wonder about the stranger who gave her a second chance." Christopher put his face in his hands. All those years, someone had been looking for him. Someone whose life he'd saved had been trying to say thank you, and he'd never known. "I'm supposed to fly this plane to Miami," Joshua said, his voice steadier now. "But when Sarah called me 20 minutes ago and told me she'd tracked you down through the flight manifest, she works for the airline. Did you know that? She has access to passenger lists. When she saw your name booked on my flight, she couldn't believe it. She called me immediately." "She works for the airline?" Christopher repeated, his mind struggling to process everything. "For 10 years now, she became a data analyst for them. She'd been checking passenger lists occasionally, hoping to find you. And today," Joshua laughed, but it sounded like crying. "Today, of all days, your name appeared on my flight." Christopher looked at the cockpit door, thinking about what had just happened in the cabin. "And then your flight attendant tried to throw me off the plane." Joshua's face darkened. When Sarah called, I was doing pre-flight checks. She was crying, begging me to make sure you stayed on the flight. She's driving to Miami right now. She was planning to meet us at the airport. To finally see you again, to finally say thank you after all these years. He stood up suddenly, anger flashing in his eyes. And then Emily told me there was a situation in first class. A black passenger being accused of having a fake ticket. I had a feeling, a terrible feeling. So I looked at the passenger list myself. You saw my name, Christopher said. C2A, Christopher Johnson. The man my sister has been searching for. The man who saved her life. Being treated like a criminal. Joshua's voice was shaking with rage now. Being humiliated, recorded, threatened with arrest, in front of everyone. Christopher felt tears running down his own face now. She really spent 12 years looking for me? Joshua picked up his phone and played a voicemail. Sarah's voice filled the tiny cockpit. Joshua, please, you have to help him. Christopher Johnson, C2A. That's him. I know it's him. Make sure he's okay. Make sure he gets to Miami. I need to see him. I need to thank him. Please, Joshua. Please. The desperation in her voice broke something in Christopher's chest. She's not the only one who wants to thank you, Joshua said quietly. Mr. Johnson, you need to know something else. Something Sarah's going to tell you in person, but I think you should know now. Christopher looked up, wiping his eyes. What? Joshua pulled out another photo on his phone. It showed a beautiful woman with long dark hair, smiling at the camera. She was holding 2 children, a boy and a girl, maybe 7 and 9 years old. That's Sarah now, Joshua said, with her kids, Marcus and Lily. Christopher stared at the photo. The woman looked happy, alive, healthy, nothing like the broken, bleeding person he'd pulled from that car 12 years ago. There's something else, Joshua said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. Something that makes what happened out there even worse. Christopher felt a chill run down his spine. What? Joshua's hand was shaking as he zoomed in on the photo. On the little boy's shirt, it said, Horizon Tech Summer Camp 2024. Christopher's mouth fell open. That's my company's program. We run free coding camps for underprivileged kids. I know, Joshua said. Marcus attended last summer. Sarah enrolled him. She didn't know you ran the program yourself. She just knew it was a good opportunity. And you, his voice cracked. You spent 3 hours one Saturday teaching her son, the son who wouldn't exist if you hadn't saved her, how to code his first game. Christopher couldn't breathe. He'd met Marcus. He remembered him. A quiet, brilliant kid with a gift for logic puzzles. You've been in her life all along, Joshua said, and you never knew it. She never knew it until 3 days ago. A sharp knock on the cockpit door made them both jump. Captain Reed. It was Miss Rodriguez's voice, high and panicked. Sir, we have a serious problem. Airport security is here. They're saying someone filed a complaint about the incident. They want to remove Mr. Johnson from the airport entirely. Joshua's face went pale. What? One of the passengers filmed everything and posted online. Miss Rodriguez continued, her voice breaking. It's going viral. The airport is getting phone calls. They're saying Mr. Johnson threatened me. They want him arrested. Christopher felt the world spinning. This couldn't be happening. Not now. Not when he was so close to finally meeting Sarah again. Joshua grabbed his radio. Ground control, this is Captain Reed. We have an emergency situation. But before he could say anything else, Christopher's phone rang. The caller ID made his blood run cold. It was his lawyer. At 9 o'clock at night. With trembling hands, Christopher answered. Christopher, where are you? His lawyer's voice was urgent. Don't move. Don't say anything. A video of you is all over the internet. People are saying terrible things. The board of directors is calling an emergency meeting. Some are talking about removing you as CEO. They're saying this kind of publicity could destroy the company. Christopher looked at Joshua, then at the phone, then at the cockpit door where security waited. Everything he'd built, everything he'd worked for, his entire life. It was all about to come crashing down. because he tried to sit in a seat he'd paid for. And somewhere out there, Sarah was driving to Miami, hoping to finally thank the man who saved her life. The man who might not make it there at all. Christopher's hand shook so badly, he almost dropped the phone. His lawyer's voice kept talking, but the words sounded like they were coming from underwater. Christopher, are you listening? You need to release a statement immediately. The video has 2 million views already. People are angry. They're calling for boycotts of Horizon Tech. Some of your biggest investors are... I didn't do anything wrong, Christopher whispered. I just tried to sit in my seat. I know that, his lawyer said quickly. But the video doesn't show everything. It starts in the middle. It makes you look aggressive. The comments are, they're really bad, Christopher. You need to get ahead of this now. Joshua was listening to everything. His face had gone from sad to angry to something else, something determined. Put him on speaker, Joshua said firmly. Christopher pressed a button. His lawyer's voice filled the cockpit. Who's that? The lawyer asked. Christopher, who are you with? This is Captain Joshua Reed, Joshua said, leaning toward the phone. I'm the pilot of this aircraft, and I witnessed everything that happened. Mr. Johnson did absolutely nothing wrong. He was harassed, accused of fraud, and threatened with arrest, all while holding a valid first-class ticket. There was silence on the other end. Then, Captain, can you make an official statement about that? I can do better than that, Joshua said. His eyes were fierce now, like a warrior ready for battle. I recorded the entire incident from the moment I left the cockpit. It's all on the airplane security system. Every word, every action, the truth. Christopher's heart jumped. You recorded it? Standard procedure when there's a disturbance, Joshua explained. The cameras in the cabin capture everything, and what they capture will prove exactly what happened. The lawyer's voice got excited. Captain Reed, we need that footage immediately. Can you send it to me? I can do better than that too, Joshua said. A small smile appeared on his face. I'm going to send it everywhere. News stations, social media. Everyone will see what really happened. Another knock on the cockpit door. Harder this time. Captain Reed, airport security is demanding access. They have orders to remove Mr. Johnson from the aircraft. It was Miss Rodriguez again. She sounded terrified now. Joshua stood up. Not happening. Sir, they have police with them now, Miss Rodriguez said through the door. Christopher felt sick. Police. This was getting worse and worse. He thought about his company, his employees, all the families who depended on Horizon Tech for their income. He thought about the kids in his summer camps, like Marcus, kids who looked up to him, who saw him as proof that they could succeed too. If he got arrested, it would all be over. Maybe I should just go with them, Christopher said quietly. Maybe that's better than fighting this. I can explain everything later. No, Joshua's voice was hard. You're not going anywhere. Do you know why? Christopher shook his head. Because if you go with them now, you'll be labeled a criminal before anyone hears the truth. Your face will be on the news in handcuffs. That image will follow you forever, no matter what happens later. Trust me, I've seen it happen before. Joshua grabbed his radio again. Ground control, this is Captain Joshua Reed, Flight 447. I need to speak with the airport director immediately. This is urgent. Static crackled. Then a woman's voice. Captain Reed, the director is already aware of the situation. He's the one who ordered security to your aircraft. Joshua's jaw tightened. Then tell him I'm refusing the order. Tell him that if anyone tries to remove my passenger, I'm shutting down this entire flight and filing a formal complaint against the airline for discrimination. Christopher's and eyes went wide. Captain, you can't. You'll lose your job. I don't care, Joshua said simply. You saved my sister's life. You think I'm going to stand by and watch you get destroyed over this? Not a chance. The radio crackled again. Captain Reed, the director says you're out of line. If you don't comply, you'll face serious consequences. Tell him to bring it on. Joshua shot back. And tell him I'm releasing the security footage in exactly 5 minutes. Let's see how he likes explaining to the world why an innocent passenger was treated like a criminal on his watch. Christopher couldn't believe what he was hearing. This man, this stranger who was really not a stranger at all, was risking everything for him. "Joshua," Christopher said softly, "you don't have to do this." Joshua turned to look at him. His eyes were red, but they were full of fire. "Yes, I do. Sarah spent 12 years looking for you. 12 years hoping to thank the man who gave her a second chance at life. And I'm not going to let some ignorant people destroy you before she gets that chance." Christopher's phone rang again. This time it was a number he didn't recognize. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Mr. Johnson?" It was a woman's voice. "Young, nervous. My name is Patricia Miller. I was on your flight, in seat 3C. Christopher remembered. She was one of the people who had been recording him. "I'm so sorry," Patricia said, and she was crying. "I posted a video of what happened to you, but I only filmed part of it. I didn't see how it started. People were saying terrible things in the comments, and I realized I made it worse. I made you look bad when you didn't do anything wrong." "Why are you calling me?" Christopher asked. "Because I just watched another video. Someone else filmed the whole thing. From the beginning, it shows that flight attendant refusing to look at your ticket. It shows her calling you a fraud before she even checked. And it shows..." Patricia's voice broke. "It shows the way she looked at you. We all saw it. We all know why she really did it." Christopher closed his eyes. "Where is this other video?" "Everywhere now. It's spreading faster than my video did. People are furious. They're saying the airline needs to fire that attendant. They're saying you deserve an apology. Mr. Johnson, I deleted my video, and I posted an apology. I'm so sorry." The phone clicked. She was gone. Joshua and Christopher looked at each other. "The truth is coming out," Joshua said. "But we're not done yet. Security is still outside this door." As if on cue, a new voice came through the door. Deeper, more authoritative. "Captain Reed, this is Airport Director Malcolm Peters. I need you to open this door right now. We can resolve the situation peacefully, but you need to cooperate." Joshua moved to the door, but didn't open it. "Director Peters, before I open this door, you need to know something. The entire world is watching now. Whatever happens next will be recorded and shared with millions of people. So I'm asking you to think very carefully about your next move." Silence. Then, "Captain, I've just been informed about the full video. I've seen it. I understand there may have been a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" Joshua's voice rose. "A man was accused of fraud, threatened with arrest, and humiliated in front of dozens of people because of the color of his skin. That's not a misunderstanding. That's discrimination." More silence. Christopher's phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. "Christopher, it's Sarah. Joshua gave me your number. I'm almost at the airport. Please tell me you're okay. Please tell me you're still there. I've waited so long to see you." Christopher's vision blurred with tears. After everything that happened, after all the chaos and fear and anger, that message reminded him why this mattered. Sarah was coming. Sarah, who wouldn't be alive without him. Sarah, whose son he'd taught to code without knowing who he really was. Sarah, who represented something Christopher had forgotten in all his success. The simple act of helping another human being. Director Peters, Christopher called out, finding his voice. "I'm Christopher Johnson. I'm the person in question. I want you to know that I'm not a threat. I'm not violent. I'm not a criminal. I'm just a man who bought a first-class ticket and tried to sit in a seat. Mr. Johnson," Director Peters said carefully, "I believe you, and I apologize for how you were treated. But you need to understand there are procedures. There was a complaint filed. I can't just ignore that, even though the complaint was false." Joshua challenged. "The police are here," Peters continued. "They need to ask some questions. It's standard procedure when there's an incident on an aircraft." Christopher looked at Joshua. "What do I do?" Joshua squeezed his shoulder. "You tell the truth, and I'll be right beside you." "Captain Reed," Peters said, "if you open this door and let us handle this professionally, I give you my word that Mr. Johnson will be treated with respect." "Your word isn't good enough," Joshua said bluntly. "I want on camera. I want you to state on video that Mr. Johnson is not under arrest and is free to leave at any time. I want you to apologize for how he was treated, and I want Miss Rodriguez suspended immediately pending an investigation. Captain, I can't just... Those are my terms, Joshua interrupted. Otherwise, this door stays closed, and every news station in the country will hear about how you tried to arrest an innocent man who was racially profiled on your airline. Christopher held his breath. Everything hung in the balance. His reputation, his company, his chance to finally meet Sarah again. Outside the door, he could hear whispers, voices arguing. Then Director Peters spoke again. Fine. Captain Reed, you win. Open the door. We'll do this your way. Joshua's hand moved toward the door handle, but before he could turn it, the entire airplane shook. Alarms started blaring. Red lights flashed on the control panel, and a voice came over Joshua's radio, panicked and urgent. All aircraft, this is ground control. We have an emergency. Evacuate the terminal immediately. This is not a drill. Christopher and Joshua stared at each other in shock. What was happening now? The alarms screamed to the airplane like angry monsters. Red lights flashed everywhere, making the cockpit look like something from a scary movie. Christopher grabbed onto the chair to steady himself as the plane shook again. What's going on? Christopher shouted over the noise. Joshua was already back at the controls, his fingers flying over buttons. His face had changed completely. No more anger, no more emotion, just pure focus. This was a pilot dealing with an emergency. Ground control, this is Captain Reed. What is the nature of the emergency? Over. Joshua's voice was calm, but Christopher could see the tension in his shoulders. Static filled the radio. Then chaos. People yelling, alarms in the background, confusion. All aircraft security breach. Unknown package. Evacuating Terminal B. Possible threat. The words cut in and out, but Christopher understood enough. His stomach dropped. A bomb threat? He whispered. Joshua didn't answer. He was already moving, hitting switches, checking screens. Emily, he shouted toward the door. Get all passengers off this aircraft now. Emergency evacuation procedures. The cockpit door flew open. Emily stood there, her face white as paper. Captain, what's happening? Possible security threat in the terminal. We need everyone off this plane in the next 2 minutes. Use all emergency exits. Go. Emily disappeared. Seconds later, Christopher heard her voice over the airplane speaker system, loud and clear. Ladies and gentlemen, this is an emergency. Please evacuate the aircraft immediately using all available exits. Leave everything behind. Move quickly, but do not run. This is not a drill. Screams erupted from the cabin. Christopher heard the sound of emergency exit doors opening with loud pops. The inflatable slides deployed with whooshing sounds. Joshua grabbed Christopher's arm. We need to get you out of here. What about you? I'm the captain. I leave last. That's the rule. Joshua pushed him toward the door. Go. Get to safety. Christopher stumbled into the cabin. It was pure chaos. People were scrambling over seats, pushing toward the exits. Children were crying. Someone had dropped their phone, and it was being crushed under running feet. The emergency slides were inflated now, bright yellow against the dark night outside. Miss Rodriguez was at the front exit, helping people slide down. When she saw Christopher, her eyes went wide. For a moment, they just stared at each other. I'm sorry, she said, so quietly you almost couldn't hear it over the noise. I'm so sorry. Christopher didn't have time to respond. Someone pushed him from behind, and suddenly he was at the exit, looking down at the long yellow slide that led to the ground far below. Jump. Slide down. Now. Miss Rodriguez shouted at him. Christopher sat down at the edge of the slide. His heart was pounding. Everything was happening so fast. Just minutes ago, he'd been in the cockpit learning about Sarah. Now, there might be a bomb in the terminal. He pushed off and felt himself flying down the slide. The wind rushed past his face. He hit the ground hard, stumbling onto the tarmac. Airport workers in bright yellow vests were there, pulling people away from the plane. Move! Move toward the emergency vehicles. They were shouting. Christopher ran. All around him, passengers from his flight, and others were running too. Some were crying. Others were on their phones, trying to call loved ones. In the distance, Christopher could see the terminal building. People were pouring out of every exit, like ants from a disturbed anthill. Fire trucks raced past, their sirens adding to the noise. Police cars, ambulances. The whole airport was in chaos. Christopher stopped running and turned around. He needed to see Joshua get off the plane. He needed to know the captain was safe. But Joshua wasn't on the slide yet. "Come on," Christopher whispered, staring at the airplane. "Come on, Joshua. Get out of there." Other crew members were sliding down now. Emily appeared, then 2 more flight attendants. But still no Joshua. "Where's the captain?" someone near Christopher asked. "He's still checking the plane," Emily said breathlessly as she ran past, making sure everyone's out. Christopher's chest felt tight. Joshua was still in there, still in danger. The man who defended him, who had risked everything for him, was still inside an airplane that might be near a bomb. "No," Christopher said. He started running back toward the plane. Sir, you can't go back there." An airport worker grabbed his arm. "The captain's still inside." Christopher shouted. "He knows what he's doing. You need to get to safety." Christopher pulled free and kept running. He didn't know what he was doing. He just knew he couldn't leave Joshua behind. Not after everything. He reached the bottom of the slide just as Joshua appeared at the exit door. "Joshua!" Christopher shouted. "Come on." Joshua saw him and shook his head. "Get away from here," he yelled back. But then Joshua turned around, looking back into the plane one more time. He was checking for anyone left behind, making sure every single person was safe. That's when Christopher saw it. In the terminal building, visible through the big windows, there was a flash of light, bright, blinding, and then the world exploded. The blast hit like a giant's fist. Christopher was thrown backward through the air. He couldn't hear anything except a high-pitched ringing. The ground came up fast, and he hit it hard. All the air knocked out his lungs. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think. His ears were screaming with pain. When he finally managed to lift his head, he saw smoke. So much smoke. It was pouring out of the terminal building like a living thing. Flames flickered in the windows. Glass had shattered everywhere, covering the ground in glittering pieces. People were lying on the ground all around him. Some were moving. Some weren't. "Joshua," Christopher tried to say, but no sound came out. His voice was gone. He forced himself to stand up. His legs felt like rubber. Everything was spinning. He looked at the airplane. The blast had pushed it sideways. One of the emergency slides had torn. And Joshua, Christopher's heart stopped. Joshua was lying at the bottom of the slide, not moving. "No!" Christopher's voice came back as a scream. He ran, stumbling over debris. His whole body hurt, but he didn't care. He reached Joshua and dropped to his knees. The captain was breathing, but his eyes were closed. Blood was running down the side of his face. "Joshua, wake up, please." Christopher put his hands on Joshua's shoulders and shook him gently. Joshua's eyes opened slowly. They were unfocused, confused. "Christopher," he mumbled. "Did everyone get out?" "Yes," Christopher said, tears running down his face. "Everyone's out. You saved them all." "Good." Joshua tried to smile. "Sarah, you need to find Sarah. She's coming here. She doesn't know about the bomb. You need to—" His eyes closed again. "No, stay with me." Christopher looked around desperately. "I need help. Medic. Someone help." Paramedics were running everywhere, but there were so many injured people, so much chaos. Christopher pulled out his phone. Somehow, impossibly, it still worked. His hands were shaking so badly, he could barely type. He pulled up Sarah's number from the text she'd sent earlier. "Sarah, don't come to the airport. There was an explosion. Joshua is hurt. I'm with him. He's alive, but he needs help. Stay away. It's not safe." He hit send and prayed she would see it in time. A paramedic finally reached them. She immediately started checking Joshua's vital signs, asking Christopher questions he could barely understand. Christopher held Joshua's hand and watched the terminal burn. Everything had gone wrong. Everything. The discrimination on the plane seemed like nothing now compared to this. People had been hurt, maybe killed, and Joshua, the man who had stood up for him, who had protected him, was lying here injured because he'd stayed behind to save everyone else. Christopher's phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. I'm already here. I'm in the parking garage. I can see the smoke. Where are you? Where's Joshua? Please tell me you're both okay. Christopher's blood ran cold. The parking garage. She was in the parking garage right now. And through the smoke and chaos, Christopher could see something that made his soul scream. The parking garage was right next to the terminal, and it was starting to collapse. Giant chunks of concrete were falling. Cars were sliding. The whole structure was coming down. Sarah was in there. Sarah, who had spent 12 years looking for him. Sarah, who had survived one accident only to drive right into another. Sarah, who had 2 children waiting at home for their mother. She was in that garage, right now, as it fell apart. Christopher looked at Joshua, unconscious in the paramedic's hands. He looked at the collapsing garage where Sarah was trapped, and he knew what he had to do, even if it killed him. He started running toward the garage. Behind him, someone screamed his name, but Christopher didn't stop. He'd saved Sarah once before. He would save her again, or die trying. Christopher's legs pumped as hard as they could. The parking garage was falling apart right in front of his eyes, piece by piece. Concrete crashed down like thunder. Metal twisted and screamed. Car alarms were going off everywhere, creating a horrible symphony of destruction. Sir, stop. You can't go in there. A firefighter tried to grab him, but Christopher dodged. He had to find Sarah. He had to. The entrance to the garage was half collapsed. Christopher squeezed through a gap in the debris, cutting his arm on jagged concrete. He barely felt it. All he could think about was Sarah, trapped somewhere in this nightmare. Sarah, he screamed. Sarah, where are you? His voice echoed in the concrete tomb. Dust filled the air so thick he could barely see. Cars were crushed under fallen slabs. Some were on fire. The smoke burned his lungs with every breath. Help! A voice, faint, female, coming from deeper in the garage. Sarah, keep talking. I'm coming. Christopher climbed over a destroyed car, slipping on broken glass. I'm here. My car is stuck. I can't open the door. Her voice was stronger now, closer. Christopher followed the sound. His eyes were watering from the smoke. Above him, he heard more concrete cracking. The whole structure was going to come down any second. He found her on the second level. Her car, a blue sedan, was pinned between a fallen concrete pillar and a crashed truck. The driver's side was completely crushed against the pillar. She was trapped inside. Christopher ran to the passenger window. Sarah was there, pressing her face against the glass. Her eyes went wide when she saw him. Even through the dirt and fear on her face, Christopher recognized her. Older now, but it was definitely her. The woman he'd pulled from a wrecked car 12 years ago. The woman who had haunted his thoughts sometimes late at night when he wondered if she'd survived, if she'd gone on to live a good life. Christopher, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Is it really you? It's me, he said, pulling at the passenger door. It wouldn't budge. The crash had jammed it shut. I'm getting you out of here. The whole garage is falling, Sarah sobbed. I heard the explosion and I tried to drive out, but then everything started collapsing and... Don't think about that, Christopher interrupted. He looked around desperately for something to break the window. Just stay calm. I've got you. A metal pipe lay nearby, knocked free from the ceiling. Christopher grabbed it and swung hard at the window. The glass spider webbed, but didn't break. He swung again. Harder. The window shattered into a million pieces. Cover your face. Christopher knocked away the remaining shards and reached inside, unlocking the door. He pulled it open and grabbed Sarah's hand. She was shaking like a leaf, but she was climbing out. "My leg," she gasped. "Something's on my leg." Christopher leaned in. Part of the dashboard had collapsed onto her left leg, pinning it. He could see her ankle was bent at a wrong angle. "Broken. This is going to hurt," he warned. "But we don't have time. The garage is coming down." As if to prove his point, another massive crack echoed above them. More concrete fell, smashing onto cars just 20 feet away. "Do it," Sarah said through gritted teeth. "Just get me out." Christopher braced his feet and pulled at the dashboard piece. His muscles screamed. It wouldn't move. "Come on," he shouted at it, pulling harder. His hands were bleeding now, torn up on the jagged metal. But he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. The metal shifted an inch. Then two. "Pull your leg out. Now!" Christopher yelled. Sarah screamed in pain, but she pulled. Her leg came free, and Christopher caught her as she tumbled out of the car. He lifted her up, put her arm around his shoulder. "Can you hop?" he asked. "I can do anything if it means getting out of here," she said. They started moving. Sarah hopped on her good leg, while Christopher supported her weight. Every step was agony for her. He could hear her trying not to scream, but she kept moving. The entrance seemed so far away, too far, behind them. The ceiling where Sarah's car had been simply gave up. The entire section collapsed with a roar like an angry god. If they had been 30 seconds slower, they would both be dead. "Keep going," Christopher urged. "We're almost there." They reached the exit just as the entire second level began to fall. Christopher practically threw both of them through the gap in the debris. They tumbled out onto the pavement outside, rolling away from the garage. The collapse was complete now. The parking garage folded in on itself like a house of cards, floor after floor pancaking down. The sound was deafening. Dust exploded outward in a massive cloud. Christopher covered Sarah's body with his own until it was over. When the dust began to settle, when the thundering stopped, Christopher finally looked up. The garage was gone. Just a massive pile of concrete and twisted metal where it had been. If they had been inside for 10 more seconds... "You saved me," Sarah whispered. She was crying. "Again. You saved me again." Christopher sat up, coughing. His whole body hurt. His hands were bleeding. He was pretty sure he'd broken a rib. But he was alive. They were both alive. 12 years ago, you told me something," Sarah said, reaching up to touch his face with a shaking hand. "While I was dying in that car. You probably don't remember." "I told you about my dreams," Christopher said softly. "About wanting to start a company. About horizons." "No. I mean, yes, you said that, but you said something else." Fresh tears ran down her dirty face. "You said, 'Stay with me'? Your story isn't over yet. You're going to do amazing things." Christopher did remember that. He'd been so scared she would die right there in his arms. He'd said whatever he could think of to keep her conscious, to keep her fighting. "And you were right," Sarah continued. "I did amazing things. I got married. I had 2 beautiful children. I built a career. I live, Christopher. I live a whole life because of you." Paramedics were running toward them now. Christopher could hear sirens, voices, chaos all around. But in this moment, it was just the 2 of them. "And now you've saved me twice," Sarah said. "How am I ever going to repay that?" Before Christopher could answer, he heard a shout. "Christopher! Sarah!" They both turned. Joshua was there, limping toward them with a paramedic trying to hold him back. His head was bandaged, and he could barely walk. But he was alive. He was awake. "Joshua!" Sarah cried out. Her brother reached them and collapsed to his knees, pulling both of them into a hug. All 3 of them were crying now, holding on to each other like they were the only real things in a world gone mad. "I thought I'd lost you both," Joshua sobbed. "I woke up and they told me the garage collapsed and Sarah was inside and you ran in after her and I thought." "We're okay," Christopher said. "We're all okay." They sat there on the ground, the 3 of them, while emergency crews worked around them. The terminal was still burning. The garage was destroyed. People were hurt. It would take months to figure out what had happened. who had planted the bomb, why they'd done it. But right now, none of that mattered. What mattered was this. 3 people who had been brought together by tragedy, twice, and had survived. 3 people whose lives were connected by something deeper than blood, or money, or fame. Connected by the simple act of helping another human being when they needed it most. Mr. Johnson? A voice interrupted them. Director Peters stood there, his suit covered in dust. His face was gray with shock. I owe you an apology. Several apologies. What happened on that plane, and then you running into a collapsing building to save someone? He shook his head. You're a hero, a real hero. Christopher looked at him tiredly. I'm not a hero. I just did what anyone should do. But most people don't, Peter said quietly. Most people don't stop at accidents. Most people don't run into collapsing buildings. Most people don't risk everything for a stranger. He paused. Though I suppose Miss Sarah Lopez isn't a stranger to you anymore. Sarah laughed through her tears. We've met twice. Both times he's pulled me out of wrecked vehicles. I think that makes us more than strangers. It makes us family, Joshua said firmly. Christopher, you saved my sister. Twice. That makes you part of our family forever, whether you like it or not. Christopher felt something warm spread through his chest. Family. He'd built a company, made millions, and employed hundreds of people. But he'd always felt alone. His own family was small, just his mother and a younger cousin. But now, sitting here in the ruins of the worst day of his life, covered in blood and dust and tears, Christopher Johnson felt less alone than he'd ever felt. His phone buzzed. It was still working. Somehow, a message from his lawyer. Christopher, the video of what happened on the plane has gone viral. 10 million views. Everyone is on your side. The airline is facing massive backlash. They want to meet with you. They're offering compensation, an apology, anything you want. And the board of directors just called. They're standing behind you 100%. The company is safe. Another message came through. This one from a news station. Mr. Johnson, we'd like to interview you about your heroic actions today. You saved a woman from a collapsing parking garage. People are calling you a hero. Then another, and another. His phone started buzzing nonstop with messages, emails, and news alerts. The story was spreading, not just about the discrimination on the plane, but about everything that happened after. About him running into danger to save Sarah. About Joshua risking his career to defend him. About all of it. Christopher turned off his phone and put it away. That can all wait, he said. What do you want to do right now? Sarah asked. Christopher looked at her, then at Joshua. These 2 people who had turned his worst day into something else. Something meaningful. Right now, he said slowly, I want to meet Marcus and Lily, your kids. I want to meet them properly, not as the CEO running summer camp, but as family. Sarah's face lit up despite the pain she must be in. They're with my husband. He's probably losing his mind with worry. I should call him. Use my phone, Joshua offered. Yours is probably buried under a ton of concrete in your car. While Sarah called her husband, Joshua turned to Christopher. Thank you, he said simply, for saving her, for being exactly the man she always believed you were. Thank you for defending me on that plane, Christopher replied. You didn't have to do that. You risked everything. Family protects family, Joshua said with a small smile. And you became family the moment you stopped at that accident 12 years ago. You just didn't know it yet. Paramedics finally convinced him to get checked out properly. Christopher's hands needed stitches. Sarah's ankle needed surgery. Joshua had a concussion, but they would all be fine. As they were being loaded into ambulances, Christopher looked back at the destroyed terminal and the collapsed garage. So much destruction, so much pain, but also so much humanity. So many people helping each other. Strangers pulling strangers to safety. Firefighters running into danger. Paramedics working tirelessly. Regular people becoming heroes because the moment demanded it. And somewhere in all that chaos, Christopher Johnson had found something he hadn't known he was missing. He'd found his family, not through blood, but through something stronger, through choosing, again and again, to help another human being, even when it cost him everything. Especially then. 3 months later, Christopher Johnson stood at a podium in front of 1,000 people. The airline had asked him to speak at their new diversity and inclusion training program, a program created because of what had happened that day. Miss Rodriguez had been fired. She'd issued a public apology, but the damage was done. The parking garage bomber had been caught, a disgruntled former airport employee with no connection to Christopher's story at all. Just terrible, tragic timing. Christopher's company, Horizon Tech, had doubled in value. The publicity from his heroic actions had brought in new investors and customers. But more importantly, it had reminded Christopher why he'd started the company in the first place: to help people see bright horizons. All people, no matter where they came from or what they looked like. Sitting in the front row were Sarah, Joshua, Marcus, and Lily. Sarah's ankle had healed, though she walked with a slight limp now. Joshua was back to flying. The kids had adopted Christopher as Uncle Chris and visited his office every week. Someone once told me, Christopher said into the microphone, that your story isn't over yet, that you're going to do amazing things. He smiled at Sarah. I didn't know how right I was. None of our stories are over, and we can all do amazing things if we just choose to help each other instead of judging each other. The audience erupted in applause. And Christopher Johnson, the boy from the Bronx who became a CEO, who saved a life and found a family, finally understood what success really meant. It wasn't about money or fame or power. It was about the connections we make, the people we help, the moments we choose kindness over fear. That was the real horizon, and it stretched out forever, bright and beautiful, for anyone brave enough to reach for it.